So this is the 9th time that we've gathered together, and we've asked the universal cyclist question. Most of you know it now. We pause, we ask, how many people right this moment in America are stuck in traffic on their way to a health club to ride a stationary bike? Too many. But because of your fine efforts, a lot more of those folks are taking advantage of cycling. It has been just an amazing period of time watching the pieces come together. I hope you feel a sense of pride and accomplishment because it wouldn't have been possible without you. I hope we can just take little things that we can seize on to work in a tangible sense to let people know your power. I've got one that I'm going to share with WABA at their gala in 2 weeks, but I'll let you in on a secret. Don't tell them that I'm going to raise this. But next year, for the summit, shouldn't we be able to find on Pennsylvania Avenue, 5 lanes wide and a median, couldn't we be able to find a little space and a little paint to stripe it for cycling? What do you think? How hard would it be? How much would it cost? What a symbol for cycling in our nation's capital if Pennsylvania Avenue had a little space for cycling. Think we can do that in a year? What? Mayor Fenty's going to be running in the marathon in a couple weeks. Those of you who will be here racing, lean up next to him and just plant that in his ear. Well, I feel a little bad that things are so good for cycling because the world, you may have noticed, is kind of falling apart in a number of areas. The economy, global warming, energy instability, water stress, health care. Our new president inherited a pretty grim situation. But cycling has an opportunity, I think, to provide a vision for the future and work in all of these areas. I hope your message on Capitol Hill this week is that you're peddling what America needs. Too hokey a theme? How hokey can we be? Well, wasn't it great to hear from our new transportation secretary? Ray has been a friend of mine for 14 years. You may have noticed there was a little bit of contention on Capitol Hill in the course of those 14 years. Ray was somebody that the Republican leadership would put in the chair because he was known for his forthright, balanced judgment, fairness, insight, and understanding of the process. Tools that he's bringing to one of the most important jobs in America. And I know when he says that we will be part of this effort, you can count on him. And it's true, when he had important people to talk to about confirmation, he was willing to come over to the house side and spend some time talking about livable communities and cycling and streetcars and all this goofy stuff that we do in Oregon. And I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate him taking the time to be here at his first bike summit. It means a lot. It means a lot. Mr. Secretary, I know from personal experience with a number of these folks going back 20 years or more that they will be your staunchest allies to implement the vision that President Obama and you have for more livable communities. And on the rare occasion where they may think that you can do it better, they'll find ways to share that with you as well. But most important, these people are committed to doing it on the ground right now. They're not waiting for the federal government. They haven't waited. They've moved forward with local initiatives, with schools, with local governments, with environmental groups, with business. It's really an exciting partnership, and I know it will be a rich and rewarding one. We've got an opportunity that is unparalleled. You know, we were remarking in 2004 where we had two ultra cyclists running for president. Senator Kerry had all this high-end stuff. He was a serious road biker. You know, he really knew how to cycle. President Bush was a dedicated mountain biker throughout his life. But you know, as important as it was, and as dedicated as they both were to cycling, you know, I'd trade them with their hard body, Lycra, whatever, you know, on expensive equipment doing all sorts of exciting things, for that picture of then Senator Obama and his family cycling along the bike path in Lake Michigan in Chicago. He looked, actually, some of you remarked when we had that great fundraiser for him in Chicago that you could trick him up a little bit with some gear and higher-end equipment, but that picture was really what it was about. Having a family that can safely enjoy cycling is an indicator species of the livable community that Secretary LaHood talked about. We've got a friend. We've got a friend, we have a role model, we have somebody who gets it, and with all the other problems that are on his agenda, I'm convinced that with your help and working with the Secretary, we can find a way for cycling to shine through. Because after all, the $825 million that Secretary LaHood mentioned that was part of the economic recovery, you know, those will be the fastest shovel-ready projects in America. They're ready to go. No environmental problems. They actually have more jobs per $1 million than big road projects or other infrastructure. We ought to drive that point home, that cycling is part of America's economic recovery. You represent over 1 million jobs, directly and indirectly. We've done a little research in Portland. We may not be entirely typical of America, but we anticipate that it's in the neighborhood of 1,000 jobs and $100 million for activity that actually improves the quality of life. I spent enough time in a city council hearing people complain about body shops next door to them. You know, nobody ever complained about a bike shop next door, did they? Did they, Jay? Well, the president in his State of the Union almost, his first joint appearance before Congress, talked about health, education, and energy along with the economy. Health? Who better to help drive that point for cost-effective improvement to the health and welfare of our families than the cycling community and the people that you work with in terms of pedestrian activity, safe routes to school, education, allowing children to be able to actually get there safely. I understand Mr. Obastar last night gave an award for a community that's got 69%. Do I have that right? 69% of the children that can walk and bike safely to school. Energy, burning calories instead of fossil fuel. I'm still doing the calculation, updating it in terms of what difference it made for me to bring a bike to Washington, D.C. instead of a car. But it's a lot of carbon, a lot of calories, a lot of money saved, and no time stuck in traffic or looking for a parking space. We have the table set for us. Secretary LaHood referenced the Surface Transportation Act reauthorization. Jim Oberstar, our Uber cyclist, is committed to not just reauthorization, but rewriting that legislation in light of what we know today. You need to help, Jim. You need to help my colleague from Oregon, Peter DeFazio, the only bike mechanic serving in Congress. Who just happens to be chairing the subcommittee that will be writing the bill. You've got allies. They need your help. I'm spending my spare time. I've told Mr. Oberst I'm on leave from Transportation and Infrastructure after 12 years to go to the Ways and Means Committee. They always introduce it as the powerful Ways and Means Committee. But that's where we're dealing with health legislation and tax legislation. And you know, we've got a money problem. You may have noticed. It frustrates me a little bit since we have given over $10 trillion in cash and commitments to the weasels who drove the economy into the ditch. But we've got a highway trust fund that is moving into deficit for the first time in our nation's history. 2 years in a row, we've had to move general fund into it. And if we don't do something in the course of the next couple of years, well, next year we're looking, I think, $26 billion from the trust fund. Now, the administration has 900 things that they have to keep track of. But one of the things we can help them with is develop grassroots support for transportation resources on a sustainable basis that makes sense over time. For the last 25 months, and some of you have participated, we've been meeting with stakeholders from the Sierra Club to the Garden Club, unions, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, contractors, local government officials, cycling advocates, to think about what that long-term vision looks like. You've got a sense of that vision. We need to make sure that we expand it, that we add greater value. This has been a theme that we've talked about here for at least 4 years in a row, to help the Department of Transportation, to help the federal government be a better partner, cut through some of the red tape that has bogged them down. With your help, with support for financial resources, for support for fundamental reform, support for a bill that makes sense on Capitol Hill to revitalize transportation for today's challenges, you're going to be able to realize the vision that you've put in place in communities across the country. I love the fact that in Portland we're running to catch up with you. There are advances all around the country that people are moving forward with. Nobody's got a monopoly on how to do this best. It is one of the most exciting things I've seen in my public service career. Well, one little point, Andy referenced trash talking. We have been relentlessly bike partisan. We have reached out. My friend and colleague, Tom Petri, is the co-chair of the Bicycle Caucus. That is symbolic in a sense, but it has come to stand for efforts to stop the attacks on enhancements, for instance, and to be able to promote cycling and camaraderie on Capitol Hill. We want you to continue to be ruthless about bike partisanship. That means invite everybody in, and it means push back when people do goofy things. It's not a free shot to attack cycling. Although I note with great interest one long-term incumbent who had an ad up attacking a delightful woman who was running in Pennsylvania and attacking her for the goofy idea that part of dealing with America's energy crisis was biking and walking. And they made what they thought was a funny ad out of it. He lost. Kathy beat a powerful 14-year incumbent, and she rode to the press conference on a bike. When she said, "Darn right, bikes belong. Right, Tim? Well, we now have 213 members of the Partisan Bike Caucus. I deliberately stopped enrolling new members when we got to that point. Because when you fan out on Capitol Hill, I want you to be able to say to the people that you talk to, oh, I notice you're not a member of the Bike Caucus. You know, you can help put us over the top to get the 218 we need to be a majority. You can all say it with a straight face because it's true. And I expect at the end of the Bike Summit that we will have a majority of the men and women in the Bike Caucus and I expect that we will be able to deal with the big picture that I'm talking about in terms of finance and vision and value and reauthorization. And while we're at it, let's continue to deal with the specific, smaller objectives that we've got. Last Congress, we were able to enact the Bike Commuter Act. Giving a tiny bit of bike equity for people that bike. You know, it's inexpensive to bike, but it's not free. Well, this session we have legislation that would be the Commuter Choice Act that would allow cyclists and transit people to mix and match. Maybe one day a week they've got carpool for soccer practice and they need to park. Maybe there's 2 days a week that they take transit. Let's make that commuter tax benefit flexible so they can spend as much as they want on transit or cycling. I think that's an objective. Doesn't cost that much. And that's one of the things we want to work with you on. We've introduced legislation we call Clean Tea that would set aside 10% of carbon fee, a tax on carbon pollution, cap and trade, whatever it is, that 10% of that would be dedicated to helping communities reduce the carbon footprint of their transportation systems and would be allocated based on how effective they are in reducing the carbon footprint. Serving on the Budget Committee and the Global Warming Committee and the Ways and Means Committee, I plan on being involved with those conversations. You may have noticed we've spent the carbon tax, cap and trade money about 4 times over on Capitol Hill. But I think you ought to put a marker down, because over a third of the greenhouse gas emissions are directly related to transportation. 2/3 is related to the built environment. And there's no reason that we can't have a little bit of that set aside for long-term sustainable support of transportation and doing it the right way. Think with us. Think with us about elements like this that ought to be woven in. I think this is an amazing opportunity. It's unlike anything that I've ever seen. In no small measure because of the hard work and dedication that you've evidenced in 9 bike summits, but more important, what you've done on the ground back home, educating, lobbying, leading by example. You have a special moment in time to be part of the solutions of all the major problems that the country faces, and to do so in a way that brings people together. We need bike partisanship now more than ever, and I look forward to working with you to achieve it. Thank you very much.